so I couldn't show them.
Well, one movie you didn't show on Lost Vision was Dark Night of the Scarecrow.
No, we would have though. It was
Yeah.
good. It was better than most of the stuff we showed.
Or it was being joined by the director of Dark Night of the Scarecrow.
J.D. Feigelson. J.D. Yeah. We're just telling stories.
Oh, okay, well, if you're around long enough, you got plenty of them.
I've already mentioned the wind splitter. Did you hear me talk about the wind splitter?
No, I was out there, I couldn't hear you.
The wind splitter is how come so few people have seen the wind splitter? Have you kept it out of circulation?
No, it was an independent film made.
In what year?
When I was living in Houston, 1970.
Okay.
We shot in Columbus, Texas, and it was a chance. We were trying to get on that Easy Rider, Billy Jack train, but we were too late with it. Too little, too late. It's a pretty good film. It's available from the same people that distribute Scarecrow. PCI has it. It's a good movie, but it was a little bit too late, and it just did not find an audience. They had already moved on by then. But what did happen from it is all the folks that put together Texas Chainsaw Massacre met.
Had worked in that movie. That's how I heard about it.
Right.
It's like everybody who acted in, a lot of people who acted in, and the people who were actual filmmakers of Texas Chainsaw Massacre had worked on the wind splitter.
That's right.
But Dark Night of the Scarecrow is achieving sort of a cult status.
It has, and I didn't even realize it until we started doing the restoration of it. What happened was Warner Brothers ended up with a distribution. They had a 27-year contract on it, and they milked it and milked it and milked it in television syndication because that was their, Warner Brothers was the top dog in television syndication. And it, I've looked at the records on it. It ran in countries I've never heard of, but they did their thing and wrung it out pretty well. And when the time period was up was 2007, the executive producer, who was my partner, Joe Bob, got a call from them that their license had expired and that they, what he wanted to do with it. And he said, well, don't you want to renew it and put it out as a DVD? No, we're not interested in it. To them, it was, Hollywood is very, very insulated. They don't know what's going on, what they call a flyover.
They don't care.
They really don't. I'm afraid to say they really don't. And so to them, it wasn't anything. And so we got it back, and Wazan asked me. He said, do you think there's any possibility of putting this out, releasing as a DVD? We own it now. And I said, I think we ought to. I think we ought to, Joe. But I still, at this point, did not know it had such a large following. But it makes sense because the first night it aired, October 24th of '81, the next morning we looked at the overnights and it had done a 38 share, which is roughly 38 million people.
A 38 share, isn't that like Super Bowl level? I've never heard of
It wasn't
38
back
share.
then. It was very, very good back then. But you must remember there was only 3 networks.
Okay.
There were only 3 networks, but it still beat everything else that was on the air. And then they did so well that CBS ran it. They had 2 runs of their license, and they ran it again the next year as the Halloween movie also. It did the same thing. So what had happened unknown to us, or unrealized by us, is that some 100 million people in the U.S. and Canada by the second year had seen that movie. And to get that in a theatrical situation, it would have to.
Right. Now, you were the writer and the producer?
No, I was the creator and writer. I came up with the concept, wrote a storyline with a writer friend of mine, Butler Hancock, and then I wrote the teleplay. Or actually, it was a screenplay because we were trying to do it as an independent feature. Because Toby was doing Chainsaw, and I wanted to do Scarecrow as an independent feature like that, but we just couldn't put ours together. And I ended up selling it at CBS, which really worked out good.
Well, I was talking earlier, like normally network TV and horror just don't mix. You gotta make too many compromises to get a horror concept airable or broadcastable for, network standards and practices. So, now, is this a watered down?
No.
No?
The urban legend is that we had to make it palatable for TV. It's actually, the truth is the other way around. Toby and I had talked about this. He went off and did Chainsaw and went the other direction, which was the direction that people were going at that time. It was just getting started, the massacre type format. I thought, since I've made so many mistakes trying to follow other people's trail, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go in the other direction. I'm going to do something that is got a morality play. It's got strong characterizations, but most of all, it's a mystery, and people will follow it. Who really is doing this? Because you don't find out until later.
Right.
And most of these kinds of films, very early on. It's who the killer is, and he's going around. So you watch a series of kills. This you really don't know. So it's got many levels to it. What's interesting about this movie is, unlike most horror movies, the theme of this movie is simply justice. That's the theme of it. And what the movie is about, it's the triumph of innocent love over death.
What year did you write this, Gene?
I wrote this, I'm going to go back and start on the story I was beginning to tell you, because now it's time to tell it. Toby had made a couple of films which were not successful. He and I were friends, and still are. And I had made another film, a Civil War movie, that didn't really do that well. It was a good movie, it ended up on PBS, but PBS has 3 people to watch it. And then we did The Wind Splitter, which was, again, too little too late. So we were talking one day, and like I said, I told him, I said, Toby, we're 30 years old now. We're old guys. We better come up with something funny here pretty quick, or we're not going to have a career in the business. And so, we sat there, I remember talking about what to do, what do you do, what do you do. Both of us loved, believe it or not, historical drama, the Roman movies, the Sword and Sandals, but that was out of the question. Not only were they not making them anymore, but the cost of those was exorbitant. So the next love was horror. So we went on our separate ways, and Toby went off and got together with Kim Cable, and they wrote Chainsaw, and I went off with Butler Hancock and wrote Scarecrow.
In the 70s?
Yeah.
You wrote it in the 70s?
No, actually, yes, it was in the early 70s. It was in the early
So
70s.
did it take, but its airing was not till
That's correct.
91?
I had tried to put that thing together all that time as an independent film and couldn't do it until one day my hard head finally it broke through that oil men don't need movies, but Hollywood does. And
So that was almost 20 years of trying to get that made.
no, because I think we wrote it in 71, 72, and it was on the air in 81, so it's a 2
Oh,
year.
81, okay.
It's a 2 years.
I thought 91, okay.
And right before we made it, I just spruced it up a little bit. But getting back to what you said, I didn't pull any punches in. That movie that CBS bought, the reason that they bought it was because they could make it an errand.
Right. Well, there is a horror subgenre called, forgive me, retard horror, and this is probably one of the best ones that's ever been done in that genre, and it's partly because of Larry Drake, who also played the mentally challenged guy on L.A. Law later. This was his audition tape for L.A. Law, right?
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, and of course it has a great villain in Charles Durning, a great performance by Charles Durning.
Right, which up until that time he hadn't played that kind of role, and he had not done a single lead role. That was Charlie's first single lead role. Also, it started another, the whole Killer Scarecrow subgenre was born out of that. I think about 7 or 8 years later, the first one came out.
Right.
And then a few
Well,
more came
and
out.
I would include in Killer Scarecrow anything that happens out in the field. So you've got Children of the Corn,
Right.
you've got Pumpkinhead, you've got, you know.
Well, now Pumpkinhead's another story because Stan Winston did a movie, did special effects on one of my pictures called Children, when Wes Craven and I did. And he came on and said, sure, like Scarecrow, that's a great movie, J.D. Guess what happened?
That's fun.
Let's open it up to questions from the audience. Anybody have any questions for these two gentlemen? Yes, sir.
Were any of the letters that you read actually from prisoners?
Oh, yeah. We had, a lot of prisons do allow cable TV, and including premium cable TV. And I guess, you know, you probably have to have privileges. You know, you got to be a good boy to get premium cable TV in prison. But sometimes in the break room or the cafeteria or whatever, they would have the show. So all of those letters that we got from prisoners, I mean, you know, anybody who's been on TV, you get letters from prisoners. We were the first show to showcase the letters from prisoners. So, and I don't know how closely you watched the show, but after a certain point, we started showcasing particular prisons that had a big Monster Vision following. And so, you know, I remember there's a federal, no, it's a state prison in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. We had a huge following in that prison. And I made the mistake one time of talking to the guys who sell the ads at Turner Television. They had a big meeting, and I said, they said, who watches your show? And I said, well, all the prisoners watch the show. And the guy says, I can't think of any product that we can market to your prison audience. And actually, one of the salesmen in the back room says, I can, 1-800-COLLECT.
On that note, though, those recipes that you would get from the prisons and make on the show, would you ever try to make that before the show?
Well, we made up most of the recipes, but we did have authentic prison recipes that we did, you know, we did make on the show. You have to, when you do a cooking show, you have to speed up time, you know, so you can't like sit there and watch it. But we really did make that goo.
Yeah, but some of those you'd be making it up, but it would come out. You'd be like, I don't think this is the way it's supposed to turn out.
Right.
Especially when you. And does every prison have a microwave in the cell?
I don't know how they get that stuff made. You know, while we're talking about this, the most interesting prisoner that wrote to me, well, Ramirez wrote, the serial killer in California, and Robert Bardo wrote to me. Now, anybody know who Robert Bardo is? You know who he is? He killed Rebecca Schaefer. And I would think that it would be one condition of his imprisonment that he can no longer write to people on TV. However, you know, I got his letter, and the woman who had prosecuted him was Marcia from the O.J. trial. Marcia Clark. And I debated about whether I should show his letter to Marcia Clark, but our policy had been to encourage the prisoners to write and not get them in trouble. I figured Robert Bardo is not coming to my house, and so we never turned him in. But I really didn't think, and it also came from Vacaville, which is the mental unit of the California State Prisons, and so I thought, this guy really should not have pen and paper be writing to people on TV, but
Yeah.
so we got some bad ones. We got a lot from Texas Death Row, and none from Oklahoma Death Row that I can remember. They probably didn't have TV in Oklahoma Death Row, but we came to consider ourselves the go-to show for imprisoned people. We had a tattoo contest.
Yes.
I had a question for Joe Bob. Do you recall the driving oath? Would you mind swearing us all in?
I remember.
Okay.
I recall the beginning of it. Okay.
Yeah, here we go. I've got it off of USA Today.
You got the text?
Yeah.
The full text?
Uh-huh.
Because there's two different versions of it.
Hold it back.
Okay. Everybody has to stand. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. We are drive-in mutants.
We are drive-in mutants.
We are not like other people.
We are not like other people.
We are sick.
We are sick.
We are disgusting.
We are disgusting.
We believe in blood and in breasts and in beasts.
We blood and breast and in beasts.
If life had a vomit meter,
If life had a vomit meter,
we'd be off the scale.
we'd be off the scale.
As long as one drive-in remains on the planet Earth,
As long as we're on planet Earth,
we will party like jungle animals.
we will party like jungle animals.
We will boogie till we puke.
We will boogie till we puke.
The drive-in will never die.
Drive-in never die.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for bringing that. Anyway, yeah, I did that. I started doing that, and then everybody wanted me to do it everywhere. And I was like, yeah, I did that at that very first show in Cleveland, actually.
I saw it on YouTube. It was UTA.
UT Arlington?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that particular video, was that from the drive-in Dead concert?
Yeah, I think we did it there too.
Yeah, that was filmed at the Arcadia in Dallas.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
I don't know if you read about the original drive-in Admiral Twin movie theater actually just burned down like last month.
I know all about the Admiral Twin, and I have to commend Tulsa. I've seen a lot of these rescue the drive-in efforts, and I've never seen one that's actually raised money. I mean,
Yeah,
this
it's
is
good.
really good. You've had two benefits. They're going to raise more money at this event for the Admiral Twin. A lot of people like wring their hands and say, "Oh, we've got to do something and bring our drive-in back." But Tulsa's really doing it. You know, I think it's impressive. Now, I hope you're going to make the owner at least pay half of it. You know, because he's getting a bonus for this.
I was also wondering if you have any more DVD commentaries on the horizon.
I'm not doing any new. I've done, I think, 12 DVD commentaries. The first one I did was "I Spit on Your Grave," which they asked me to do that because I was the only critic who had ever written a positive review of the original "I Spit on Your Grave," and you know, the DVD business has gone down, way down, and they're not really doing those with the massive extras on them anymore. And so I did 3 for Elite Entertainment and 9 for Media Blasters, and they're just not doing those kind of commentaries anymore. I've talked to you know, the guys at Mystery Science Theater. They do that thing Riff Tracks now, where you don't really have to own the movie in order to do the commentary on the movie. Does anybody use that? Has anybody done that? Done the Riff Tracks? Does it work? Do you like it?
You got to get the timing just right.
That's what I thought. See, you know, you give people a symbol or an icon or a word or something at the beginning of the movie. You have to sync up the commentary right on that word, and then then you can watch. What if you pause it?
Pause it.
You lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, they at least usually give you a sense that, okay, press play now, and then you can start it. But if you got to pause it or something, you got to
See, the way I do the DVD commentaries, mine are wall-to-wall talk.
Mhm.
And so I didn't do that on "I Spit on Your Grave," and people told me, they said, you know, like, hey, don't stop talking because we've already seen the movie. Now we're watching it again. We're watching it for the commentary track, so don't stop talking. And I didn't think about those cues.
Yeah, it is. Any other questions?
I had a question about Monster Vision. One of the things that was really refreshing about that show was that you were, at least it was new to me, I'd never seen a host that was openly critical of his network. And I especially remember the Friday the 13th marathon. You guys didn't get the rights before, and you made a big deal about it, which was really interesting. Did
Yeah.
Turner and the network come down on you pretty hard about that? Or, I mean, did you ever
No.
get a lot of feedback?
The only times I had actual disputes, real disputes. Well, I was afraid to talk about Jane Fonda. You know, we showed Barbarella one time, and I said, I thought, are you trying to get me fired? Why are you giving me Barbarella? Barbarella, she's married to Ted Turner. At the time we showed Barbarella on the show, and I'm like, come on, just like, I can just like say something offhand that I don't even think is important, and Jane Fonda can have me fired. And I said, that's crazy. But we showed Barbarella without incident, and I was made to understand that Jane hates Barbarella, you know, which made it even worse, you know. And so there were things like that were just kind of worrisome. But the only times I would have, they have a list of forbidden words at TNT, Standards and Practices Department, for all the Turner Network. And I was familiar with the list, and I didn't care about the list because a lot of the words I use are nonsense words. And so some words that I made up started turning up on the list. He said, you can't put that on the list, it's not a real word. You know, and one of them that they really hated, and I used it for a while, and then they said, you can no longer use this word, was lesbo. And I said, well, it's just an abbreviated version of lesbian, and it's closer to the Isle of Lesbos than the word lesbian is, where lesbianism was invented. I said, I don't think it's that horrible a word that you cannot use lesbo. And then I used to use the word slopehead. And a bunch of slopeheads came in, you know, with AK-47s came in and said, they said, you know, you can no longer use slopehead. I was like, what does slopehead mean? I'm not sure what slopehead means. And they said, well, that's a slur against Asian people. And I said, it is not. That's slant eye. Slant eye is the slur against Asian. I know what slurs are against Asian people. Slopehead is not. What people have sloped heads. You know, let's look at some pictures and figure out who that's a slur against. You know, but they wouldn't let me use slopehead. And you know, it's like increasingly all these words would get on the list, and it's like, don't use this word, don't use that word. Because they would think there must be something wrong with the word, even if it was a nonsense word. So that was a little frustrating. I was trying to use the nonsense words so I wouldn't say the words on their list, you know?
We have time for one more question. All right.
Growing up, watching drive-in films and low-budget movies and what have you, was there a point like in your early life that was maybe like a revelation? Kind of just like, this is what I'm into, you know, maybe one movie or a certain time that made you realize that's what you love?
You know, yeah, well, when I was a kid, it was a more permissive time than today, and so some of the things I did as a early teenager, you know, 13, 14, 15 years old, would be felonies today that would, you know, that you would never come back from the reformatory and probably long prison term. But one thing we did is we sneaked in porno films all the time, when they showed porno films in theaters. You know, it's like, these were hardcore. There was one particular place in downtown North Little Rock, Arkansas, where there were guys in raincoats, and they had so many incidents of, I don't want to know what the guys did, and we never really found out what the guys did, but they had taken out every other seat in the theater, so like there were spaces between the seats so that nobody could touch the guy next to him or be aware of what the other guy in the next seat was doing, you know. And we would go to these theaters because we wanted to see, you know, Swedish whatever. It always had Swedish in the title, you know. So that was a fairly warping experience. And then I remember the movie that I saw that scared me the most on the horror side of the equation, because they had a film called Wolfen, And most people don't like wolves. I'm one of the few people that honestly says, I was terrified by wolves. It was actually the first film, this is a little known trivia, the first film to use the Steadicam. And maybe that's what scared me, because I don't know if you remember, it's ravening wolves, ravening spectral wolves rampaging through the South Bronx. And, you know, they had the wolf cam, and the wolf cam was a Steadicam with a kind of reverse lens. And it would go through all these terrible areas in the South Bronx. And there was something about the way those wolves, you know, would leap into the frame that just scared the crap out of me. And I remember thinking, that's a scary movie. And a lot of the more graphics, that one was not that graphic really. A lot of more graphic stuff didn't scare me too much, although it didn't bother me. But I wouldn't say it was I wouldn't say it was any one film. But basically, the films that affected me were the films that I could never tell my mother that I had seen. So, you know, it was, you know, all we were doing as teenagers was things our parents could never find out about. And, you know, at our level of underage drinking and things today that would get you really hammered, you could always find adults who were a little bit more lenient about that than they would be today. So we were lucky. They let us go. They let us live. You know.
Parents ever find out about it?
Yeah, because I've told them about some of the vandalism and you know, they were definitely crimes. Some of the things we did were definitely crimes, but we just never got caught. Fortunately, we never got caught.
I have one last question for you, sir. How does it feel to have people, like a younger generation, watching Dark Knight of the Scarecrow at conventions?
You're asking what about that now?
When you go to the convention.
The reaction?
Yeah, the reaction from the people.
You know, it's been fascinating. They haven't seen anything like it. They haven't seen a horror movie with a story, you know, and with something that reveals itself and unravels, something that the horror scenes in it require the use of your own mind as well as what you're seeing on the screen. And that comes about from my childhood and listening to Interception on the radio, because it required you to make all those pictures in your head. And they were always a lot scarier than they put up on the screen. If you remember the original movie Alien, you almost never saw it, but it was always lurking somewhere, and when it did appear for just a moment behind somebody before it grabbed them, it scared the heck out of me. That was a scary movie, and it based its approach on the original version of The Thing, which is the same thing. You almost didn't see it. The Scarecrow, in turn, that's the same approach. Because if you really think about it, when you show your monster, they're usually silly.
Yeah. You know, one thing I tell you, we have many filmmakers here today. Well, just two. Four. They don't want to admit it. People don't want to admit they make films. I always tell them, you know, it's like we're so savvy now about what when we watch horror films, we're so aware of what all the conventions of filmmaking are that I tell them, you know, one thing you can do that just keeps people on edge, scares the crap out of them, is you know, start out on somebody with a shot that's out here, and just bring the camera in closer and closer and closer and closer and closer on their face, and nothing ever has to happen. Except as the frame gets to about here, everybody becomes really, really tense because they just know something's going to come from the edge of that frame, and you don't even have to deliver on that thing coming. That's right. If you just keep framing people like that, we're so conditioned for stuff to come out of the edge of the frame when it gets close up, because of so many hack filmmakers for so many years using it, that now you don't have to deliver on it. You can just like keep people on edge the whole movie.
Fear, which is an emotion, rather than shock, which is a reaction. Fear is all based on anticipation. It's based on what you think is going to happen, what you're preparing yourself for. And boy, Hitchcock used to be able to turn that screw down. And it really, to me, it works better. And that's the approach that I've always taken.
Well, JD, I have the drive-in totals for Dark Knight of the Scarecrow. I'm not going to read you the whole review because some of you probably haven't seen it, so I don't want to give away any plot points. But the drive-in totals for Dark Knight of the Scarecrow: 6 dead bodies, 0 breasts made for TV, 2 beasts, counting Charles Durning, 1 coon dog chase with a fall down a hill, 1 mail truck chase. That may be the only mail truck chase in film history, with tumbling Charles Durning. 1 combine chase. I have seen the combine chase done by 2 or 3 others. Okay. With pumpkin grinding, mailman plotting, 1 dog attack, multiple leering yard gnomes, old lady defiance, pitchfork planting, courtroom posturing, 1 menacing scarecrow, swan dive into a wood chipper, 1 horrifying Halloween party with apple bobbing, character actor hysterics, old lady manhandling, old lady immolation with fireball, creepy doll cradling, 1 illegal exhumation, pitchfork impalement, shotgun food, heart attack food, grain silo food, and shovel food. Drive-In Academy Award nominations for Lane Smith as Otis's sidekick Harless for repeatedly cackling fried chicken. Tanya Crow as Little Mary Lee for saying, "Did I ever show you how to play the chasing game? You'll like it." Jocelyn Brando as Bubba's mother for screeching, "There's other justice in this world besides the law." And Charles Durning as Otis for narrowing his eyes and pronouncing, "He's a blight, like stinkweed and cutworm that you spray and spray to get rid of, but it always keeps coming back." 4 stars. Joe Bob says, check it out.
All true.
All right.
I think students told her to write.
You guys starting it? Yeah. You always have a little inspection of waste, but all 3. He's got this little cigarillo sticking out of his mouth.
I thought I was going to ask about the cigar incident with